Welcome back to World's News, where we present you the most important and funniest news from the past week. This week's topics are a meat attack in England, how the understanding of physics was shattered, war crimes in Bucha, and finally Martin Luther King Jr. I hope that you'll enjoy this week's news, so let's jump right into the video. Meat attack in England. Yes, this sounds hilarious and weird at the same time, but wait till you see the picture. Lamb chops were stuffed into a car's exhaust pipe during an attack on homes that used raw meat as projectiles. And that is not even it. Another vehicle was left with a chicken drumstick hanging from a wheel rim. I mean, just look at this. It's just a waste of food. I mean, the exhaust thing could at least do some damage to the car, so the person that did this would have achieved at least one very weird goal. But the chicken drumstick on the rim is just weird, or am I wrong? And what kind of an attack was that anyways? Because that person seems to don't like cars or pollution, which would be kind of understandable, but also animals, which is a very rare combo. I mean, this will definitely become a meme, but still. Why? The understanding of physics was shattered. I know this sounds like huge clickbait, but it actually isn't. Because this shocking result in a particle experiment could spark a physics revolution. Now, you might have heard the terms dark matter or dark energy, which is an invisible matter in our universe and couldn't really be explained yet. Same goes for gravity. I mean, we know that gravity has something to do with the mass of planets, but its very source couldn't be explained, until now. Scientists outside Chicago have found that the mass of a subatomic particle is not what it should be. Now, the following is knowledge that most people don't really understand, me neither by the way, but it's still cool to brag with facts like this, so let's go. A team of scientists found that the particle, which is known as W boson, is more massive than the theories predicted. The result has been described as, quote, shocking by Professor David Toback, who is the project co-spokesperson. And this discovery could lead to a new, more complete theory of how the universe works. He told the American newspaper BBC that the world is going to look different and that there has to be a paradigm shift. If you're like me and have no clue what he just said, stick with me, because I've taken my time and done some research on this so you don't have to. A paradigm shift basically is a fundamental change in the basic concepts and experimental practices of a scientific discipline. Now, the difference in that particle's mass is just 0.1%, but if this will be confirmed by other experiments, the implications are enormous, because the so-called standard model of particle physics will have predicted the behavior and properties of subatomic particles with no discrepancies for 50 years. And if that was true, this could even be the result of an as yet undiscovered fifth force of nature being at play. And now we've reached what I said in the introduction of this topic. This could bring humanity a step further towards an explanation for dark matter, dark energy and gravity. And because of that, these new results could herald the biggest shift in our understanding of the universe since Albert Einstein's theories of relativity more than 100 years ago. So this sounds amazing and all, but is there a chance that these scientists just made a mistake? Well, they thought so too, but they searched their system for any possible errors and an analysis of their entire experiment didn't leave the possibility of a mistake. But the physics community is still cautious because this was only one experiment and the result of the other tests and experiments will clarify the situation. And speaking of clarify, I think that I'm only grasping very little of what this means, but I think that most of you aren't professors of physics as well. So we'll see how that plays out and hope that we'll be able to understand the new developments in apparently all physics. War crimes in Bucha. I'm sure you've heard of this, so I won't go too much into detail. When Russian troops left the Ukrainian city Bucha and Ukrainian soldiers took over that area again, they found tons of bodies of Bucha residents, and I'm not only talking about men, but also women and children. And not all of the bodies laid in the mass graves that the Russians dug, many just laid on the streets where they were executed. And we heard of Russian war crimes before, but never of something like that. When this got public, Russia denied any participation in the killing of these civilians and even stated that these people weren't dead when the Russian soldiers left. But satellite images later showed that these bodies were in the streets when the Russians left. So the allegations of genocide in Bucha are backed with visual material. Because of that, the UN Human Rights Council finally decided to suspend Russia from its position in the UN Security Council, and I'll tell you why that's important. So, the UN is structured in a way that minimizes errors, but because of that, this structure minimizes actions as well. To send UN troops to battle, a majority of countries that were elected into the UN Security Council is needed. Among these, there are some countries that have a higher status in the UN, the permanent members of the Security Council. These are the victorious powers from the Second World War, and among them is the Russian Federation. So because they have such a special position in the UN, they are all able to single-handedly stop decisions from being made. And because Russia is able to do so, the UN couldn't make any decisions that would have helped Ukraine. But now that Russia was suspended from its position, the UN will be able to send help to Ukraine. But back to the topic. Later, President Volodymyr Zelensky visited Bucha and paid his respects to the dead and their families. Apart from that, the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, also visited Bucha. But to prevent a nuclear war, other countries' military forces remain on standby. Only new sanctions against Russia are introduced almost on a daily basis. And another thing. Apparently, Ukrainian parents have started writing their family contacts on the bodies of their children in case they would get killed and their child survives. So yeah, I don't really know what to say about this other than that this world is cruel, so I'll move on to the next topic. Martin Luther King Jr. A few days ago, on April 4th, the world remembered Martin Luther King Jr. And I hope that everybody knows who he was and what he achieved. But for the people that don't, Martin Luther King Jr. was an American Baptist minister and activist. He is one of the, if not the most well-known activists for human rights. To give you some examples, he was the most visible spokesman and leader of the civil rights movement. He helped Rosa Parks in her battles against the discrimination of people of color, and the probably most well-known quote of Martin Luther King Jr. is his iconic "I have a dream," which goes on with,
"I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal."
Oh, and if you wondered why the world remembered him on that special day, on the 4th of April in 1968, he was assassinated at the age of 39 on a balcony of the Lorraine Motel in Memphis, Tennessee in the US. But in terms of activists against racism and discrimination against all kinds of people, he could have been the greatest person to ever live. These were the most important, sad and funny news from the past week. If you've got any suggestions on topics that we missed out on, feel free to let us know in the comics. Oh, and once you're down there, please consider liking and subscribing, since we're a very young channel and you'd help us out a ton. But now to this week's bonus fact. Have you ever asked yourself if ears grow as you're getting older? Well, most parts of your body, like bones, stop growing, and muscle and fat cells stop dividing after puberty. But cartilage, which is the plastic-like stuff in ears and noses, actually grows until you die. And not only does cartilage grow, but the earlobes elongate from gravity, which makes your ears look even larger. So yes, your ears and even your nose keep growing for your entire life.